What's up guys, my name is James and in today's video we're going to talk about Airbnb regulations. Specifically, I want to talk about two slightly different topics. Number one, I want to talk to you about how you can figure out what the regulations are in your area or really any given area for having a property listed on Airbnb, as well as how you can find the regulations for your ability to manage other people's properties on Airbnb in whether it's your area or really any area at all. Now, a lot of people think that these are the same things, that they're going to be the same exact rules and regulations for managing your own property and just having the property listed on Airbnb compared to actually managing a property on Airbnb. However, they can sometimes be a little bit different. So we're going to talk about both of those. Now, before getting to the video, I'd love to ask you a quick favor. If you could just take a second and subscribe to the channel. If you want to see new videos like this twice every single week, they're going to give you all the latest on Airbnb, all the best strategies for how to grow your Airbnb or your Airbnb management company. Then just click the subscribe button down below and subscribe to the channel to get access to all of our latest videos. And also, if you get value from this video, if you appreciate the videos, if you learn something new from them, then please click the like button. That helps you out a lot with the YouTube algorithm as well. So if you could do that, I would really appreciate that as well. So to get started with it, there are typically, like I said, two different categories of regulations. The first are going to be your regulations around having a property on Airbnb, period, in a given area. Some areas completely ban Airbnb. However, they are very, very rare in North America. So other cities, other places, other locales are going to have different regulations around things that you need to do in order to list your property on Airbnb and still be compliant with the given regulation. For example, cities like Nashville require licensing. So there's a limited number of licenses. You have to get a license for your property in order to have it listed on Airbnb. So there's a process involved with that on that front. Other cities like, for example, Toronto require it to be a primary residence. Some cities have night caps in terms of you're only allowed to rent the property on short-term rental for X number of nights out of a year. And so there's all kinds of different potential regulation landscapes. Other places like Melbourne, Australia, I know, has a complete, they've got a complete ban against banning Airbnbs, meaning that they put it into law that you're not allowed to limit the way that a person uses their property like that. So, Condo Corp cannot tell you not to manage your property on Airbnb. So it's very, very Airbnb friendly in cities like that. Other cities like New York City have a complete ban on Airbnb, meaning you're not allowed to put your property on Airbnb. So there's a whole big spectrum, and the question kind of comes down, the one that gets asked pretty often is, how do I figure it out? Like, where do I actually go? How do I figure out exactly what the regulations are, if there even are any for my area? And so that's a really great question, because the answer isn't quite as simple as you might think. The reality is that there's a whole bunch of different biased sources of information, just like anything else. And so if you just kind of go and do a quick Google search, you're likely to find different articles by different news publishing companies, whatever else, that might be pointing you in one direction or the other, but that might not actually be very accurate. I can speak firsthand to this because I was actually managing properties in Airbnb as the city of Toronto started, going through the process of establishing new regulations for Toronto and Airbnb. And what we found was that, as there was a different part of the process that we were going through, as things were getting closer to regulations being made, there were different magazines, different news publishing companies that were posting all kinds of very, very biased articles that, if you read them, would lead you to believe that the legislation had already been passed, that their rules were already strictly being enforced, when in reality, it was still 18 months before a decision got decided on, and that decision ended up being a total reversal from what it looked like early on. So what you really, really want to do is start off by just going to your local area, whether that's your city or your state's website. Just look for the actual government website and look to actually find the specific documentation of the regulation. A lot of people are scared to do this because they're scared of all the jargon that's likely to be in these articles and making it very difficult to sift through them and figure out exactly what the regulations are. A lot of people are just intimidated by that. But I can assure you that that is going to be the only place that you can go to get truly unbiased information and to really fully understand the lay of the land wherever you are. Now, the other reality of this is it's actually quite easy to understand what's going on in these legal documents. If you have questions about it, you can always call your city's office or your state's office as well and get more clarity on it. And whenever you're asking questions, you want to be relating to the documentation. You want to, ask questions, and then whenever there's an answer provided, because some people can be misinformed, you want to make sure that you ask for the specific documentation that provides that answer that they're providing you with. So if someone tells you that you can or cannot Airbnb your property, you want to ask them for the documentation that either says you can or says you cannot. So you just want to get everything in writing, have it in front of you, and be able to really read through it and understand it fully. Now, pretty much the same process can be said for managing properties on Airbnb. You're going to go through the same process for figuring out whether or not you're allowed to manage properties on Airbnb and what kind of restrictions there might be or regulations there might be around that. But again, bear in mind that this is where I find that people are most often misinformed, because a lot of people assume that managing properties on short-term rental falls into the same categories as managing properties on long-term rental. The reality is that's just not true. Managing properties on long-term rental, you're dealing with things like the Landlord and Tenancy Act, you're dealing with the collection of rents, you're dealing with the negotiation of leases, and so typically in most areas that's going to have a different regulation set altogether versus short-term rentals where you're not doing any of those things. Now, I'm not saying that they can't sometimes overlap to some degree, but in most cases you're going to have different activities that are involved in managing properties on long-term rental, and so they're typically going to fall under different regulation sets than managing properties on short-term rental. So again, there's a couple of different websites that you can go to, such as allpropertymanagement.com, that are going to give you a good baseline for things to look at. But in general, I do recommend still just sticking to your city or your state's local website, the actual government website where you can find that documentation. Now, the other question I get following this up is, a lot of people ask, well, if there are regulations, are there ways for me to work around it? Are there ways for me to work within it? Are there ways for me to work in a different area where maybe it's more lenient? And the answer to all of it is yes. Depending on where you are, no matter where you are, there's always ways to either work around the regulation, work within the regulation, or to operate outside of it. And whenever I say that, I don't mean doing anything illegally. I'm not saying operate in the gray. I actually really strongly recommend against operating in any kind of an ambiguous area where there's unclear regulation, where you might be at risk, because you're just exposing yourself to a whole bunch of unnecessary risk whenever you do that. What I recommend is figuring out ways to operate within the regulations, such as, for example, in a city where there's a night cap. If you're only able to rent your property on short-term rental for 180 nights out of the year, let's say, then what you'll want to do is make sure that during the down season, you're focusing on rentals of 30 days or longer. During the high season, for about 8 months or so, you're going to be able to rent your property as you normally would on short-term rental. Because remember, you're not going to have 100% occupancy rate. So although 180 nights is technically half the year, that's technically 6 months, you're not going to get 6 months booked straight without a single gap, a single opening in your calendar. If you do that, you're doing really phenomenally well, and realistically, you're actually probably leaving a bunch of money on the table by underpricing your property if you're that booked to that extent. But those 180 nights are probably going to last you about 7 or 8 months. So that means that the remaining 4 or 5 months out of the year, you just need to find longer term stays that are going to last longer than 30 days, and you can have the best of both worlds and have a property still perform really, really well that way. So there's different regulations that you can work within doing it that way, or alternatively, you can also just operate in a different area. You can operate and manage a property completely remotely. You can do that, in a different city, in a different state, even in a different country from where you actually live. Now, if you want the specifics of exactly how to do that, or you want the specifics of exactly how to, go into more depth about really analyzing your market and figuring out from a regulation standpoint, as well as just from a the opportunity standpoint, you really want to sort out and figure out where is the best place to start your management company, then I've left a link down below to a free training where I walk through exactly that in a huge amount of detail. I also walk through how to manage properties remotely, how to pick the best area, all that stuff. So again, if you want access to all that free training, then just register for the free training at the link down below. So Hopefully this has helped to clear up that question that I often get around researching regulation. At the end of the day, you want to rely on your government's state or city website. Specifically, don't go and trust any kind of media that you get, because it's usually going to be biased and it's usually going to be only a fraction of the real information that you actually need. So go to your government's website, and if you want more details about how to work within regulations and how to operate and manage your properties remotely, then just check out the links in the training below. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. And if you like the video, please give it a like, give it a thumbs up. It helps me out tremendously. So I'll see you in the next video.